I think what's the difference between unit test and integration test? So this is a simple example. Here we have a price converter, which takes rate API as a dependency injection. And so, I mean, this is like not the perfect example. If you're writing an actual app, use a DDI library if possible.
Hello and welcome everyone. Hope you're keeping well and staying safe. This is Hafsan Jom and I am a community executive at Recro, wherein we are working towards building an exclusive community for developers to help you get connected with like-minded people, build your network and grow professionally. So those who don't know about what Recro is, we are a developer-focused platform helping developers to meet the right opportunities by connecting them with the fast-growing startups such as PureFit, Udan, Swiggy, Dunzo, etc. So welcome to Recro Talks, and we are doing a webinar on testing in Android today. And our guest speaker for today is Harshit Bangal. So Harshit is a software engineer at Twitter, and he's an ex-Uber India. He's also having 8+ years of experience in the industry and have worked with the brands like Amazon and Royal. So thank you so much, Harshit, for joining us today. So you may go ahead and say hi to the audience.
Cool. Hey folks, welcome to the session. Hope my screen is visible to everyone. So hey folks, welcome to this session on testing on Android. And just to be very clear, it's kind of a misnomer. Like testing on Android is a very, very big topic. So I'm going to talk about few very specific things about why do we need testing on Android, and some bits and pieces about like some library internals like JUnit or RoboElectric, which if you are mobile developers, you guys may have already used it to some extent. So before starting, let me introduce myself. I'm Harshit. So I'm a staff engineer at Twitter. Here, I just recently joined. Like I'm mostly going to work on India-related problems. Before that, I was a tech lead at Uber. So there I got a chance to work on. So I led the efforts like Uber Lite. I'm not sure if any of you have used it before, which was a small app which we completely made it in India, like built in the India office itself. Cool. So yeah, I think the agenda for today is very simple. And just to clarify, like it's again, I mean, it's supposed to be interactive. So feel free to ping Q&A in between. So every few slides, I'm going to pick some questions. And yeah, it's very specific. Like, I mean, and if you like the content, like again, like do let me know, like, or let the team know through like Twitter or LinkedIn, and we'll be happy to do follow-ups. So I think the agenda is, I mean, briefly, we are going to talk about theoretical aspect, like why do we need tests, types of tests, and then mostly like we are going to talk about unit testing and UI testing. And I have intentionally, so I mean, the only part like which is going to be demoable is unit testing. So UI testing and most of the other things are in slides, but unit testing is something where I'm going to go dig deeper into the slides and yeah, I mean into the code, and like hopefully I can show you some working examples and like probably like how things work at end to end, at how are things like at less end to end at Uber, right? So yeah, I think before starting, like I think maybe it's a question for all of you. Like I mean, why do we need testing, right? Feel free to comment in the Q&A. Here are like some specific things which I use like testing for. So test as a quality tool. So bugs, regression, like, I mean, if you're working on any Android app, that's fairly complex. Like Uber was, Twitter is, like, and you don't know all the aspects in and out. Test acts as a quality tool. Like I don't have to worry too much about shipping my code like every week to production if I have a very good stable set of tests, right? I mean, having said that, like tests are just not the only way. Like there are of course other mechanisms like static code analyzers and other things. Or like even like you sometimes have manual testing teams, like which most of the companies which I have worked in, they had the QA team. But yeah, I mean, tests like in general, like super useful to act as a quality tool. I think the third thing which I want to brought out is like test as a design tool. So, I mean, and then I'll come to the second point later because I want to just show you some intricacies there. So another thing which I find very useful about testing is like test as a design tool for my my code design, right? So I mean, as an example, like if I'm trying to create an app, and if I don't use dependency injection, then it's really hard to write, let's say, unit test for those methods. I mean, if I have to mock a dependency or if I have to create a fake implementation for dependency, then I need to create, I need to compose my units. Like, I mean, if my unit B is depending on A, then I need to compose it. I need to use dependency injection. And it also enforces things like programming against interface. Like if you're, let's say, using fakes, right? I mean, in fakes, you have an actual implementation and then you have a fake implementation, right? So it kind of, so I mean, testing is like a great design tool. Like I think the final thing which I want to point out, like why do we need testing, is testing as a documentation. And here I think I want to show you very interesting thing like about retrofit. I mean, this library I'm pretty sure most of us must be using. So retrofit, like, is written by Square. It's a REST client. Actually, it's not a REST client, but it's written on top of REST client, which is OKHTTP. So, I mean, what retrofit does, what retrofit does not allow is like void as a return type, which I never knew. And Square, like as a team, as a company, they write like some amazing libraries, and their unit testing is like awesome. So, I mean, I learned a lot like by looking at their test. I mean, so I learned a lot of things here. Like, I mean, one thing which I noticed is like void is not allowed as a return type. Another interesting thing which I learned is like retrofit, some of the configurations in retrofit, like validate eagerly. So basically it catches things like void is a return type at the start itself, right? Upfront itself. So my point is like, I mean, unit test, like you are going to learn a lot of these things, which are, by looking at unit test, you're going to learn a lot about these APIs, which are not documented in the public, let's say API docs, right? Yeah, I think I'll just check the question. So I think I already talked about it. Sure. I mean, let's come to that. So yeah, I'll be talking about integration test also, but I mean, I don't have much time, I'll say. Like, I mean, mostly, I think it's mostly going to be about unit test, and then integration test in depth we can do like at some point later. Cool. I think some more theory, and then I think after that we'll just jump directly to the actual coding. So I mean, there are types of tests. You have unit test, integration test, and end-to-end test. I think the reason I want to bring it up is like I just wanted to show how Uber structured its tests, and like what is the distribution ratio, and like how the CI pipeline look like. So unit test, like basically you're testing a small part of your app, like in isolation. In an ideal world, that's not possible. Like even if you have, let's say, written a unit test, it's still going to like call some platform component. So it's not going to be a complete isolation, but some kind of isolation. Integration test, like basically test integration between two units. So I'm going to just show you the difference between these two things. And then end-to-end test, like basically test a part of your app, like one whole screen. Let's say if you're using Twitter, then maybe the timeline screen. If you're using Uber, then probably the trip request flow, right? Which is actually far more complex than like just one end-to-end test, because you also need a driver component. But yeah, I mean, these are the three things. And these are like, this is just only one way of segmenting testing. I mean, you can also have other types like API UI testing. Like, so I mean, most of the Android developers I know, right, like here must be like working on the API contract with the backend team. So I mean, like what can we do about API testing, right? I mean, so I'm not going to talk about specifically about API testing, but the point I want to bring is like, there are like amazing libraries just to test APIs as well. Like, I mean, libraries like Rest Assured, which has like amazing infrastructure, but I'm not going to talk about these things to be specific. Like I'm mostly going to talk about unit and UI testing, but I'll like link some documents in the end so that like you can go through this, right? And yeah, you can of course have more segmentations, automation, manual, functional, performance, accessibility, compatibility testing, right? I mean, Espresso allowed you also like some kind of performance testing. So these are different things, but I'm mostly going to focus on unit test and UI test. And of course, UI test can be integration, can be end-to-end. So mostly these two aspects. Yeah, I think just one final, I think I want to bring out, like in theory, is like unit tests are the fastest, they're cheapest, one test per method. And that method is ideally supposed to be completely isolated, which is definitely not possible. It's probably going to call either Java APIs or Android APIs, but still it's pretty isolated and supposed to be very, very fast. Integration according to test pyramid, integration test is like 20%. These are going to be slower, and these are going to be like flakier. Like, so I mean, the reliability of these tests are going to be much more problematic. So you have to consistently fix these tests. Like, you'll get far more problems here. And then end-to-end tests are like usually the least. Like, and this is a test pyramid that's written by Google. So actually, it's before Google, but yeah, I mean, Google kind of made it popular, at least in some sense. So yeah, end-to-end tests, like, they are like usually 10% of all the tests, like in Uber stack, like that was the case. And they are like insanely hard to like they were insanely hard to, let's say, you can say, manage. Or like, I mean, every once in a while, like almost every integration end-to-end test which I have written, almost most of them broke like after like few weeks, and I have to go and constantly update those tests, right? And at Uber, like, I mean, reliability was such a big issue that we actually never tested against, let's say, actual network call, right? Which most of the apps do. Like, and so I'm going to talk about some of the challenges in end-to-end or UI tests there. So this was a flow at Uber. Like, every time you raise a pull request, so we use a tool called Fabricator, which is very similar to GitHub. But yeah, when you raise a PR pull request, you have a CI which run unit tests and like some other checks like lints and error prone, some other static analyzer, KT-lint or detect, like if you guys are using Kotlin. Like, so I mean, for us, like at Uber, it was mostly lint, like for UST analysis, like for both Android and for both Kotlin and Java. And yeah, the other static code analyzer we had was error prone. But yeah, I mean, unit tests, some static code analysis, and then the actual APK you are building right out of this. So some quality checks on top of it. You push the code, you send the PR, you get the feedback. If you get feedback, you address this, then it goes back into the loop. So it's going to run again CI. So it's with unit tests and those quality checks. And if you don't get any other feedback, then that means your diff is approved. So you can now land it. And we have something called Submit Queue at Uber, which is basically a place where you can land your code. And here we ran both unit tests and UI tests. The idea was like our UI test pipeline was not very stable. And so we actually intentionally avoided while we were actually like sending the pull request, and we only ran it in this submit queue code path. I mean, and just to point out, like, I think Uber's UI tests did not use actual network, most of the tests. And like we had like amazing infrastructure which can catch like flaky tests, and like we had CI jobs which automatically disable those tests from CI. So I mean, it was a lot of effort. Like, and to be very honest, like writing CI tests is easy. You have Android plugin SDK. I mean, Android Studio has a plugin which can generate those tests for you. But writing like good, manageable like tests, UI tests is like much harder than, let's say, unit test. Cool. I think no new questions, right? It's cool. So I'll continue. I think I'll just want to point out one more thing. I think what's the difference between unit test and integration test? So this is a simple example. Here we have a price converter, which takes rate API as a dependency injection. And so, I mean, this is like not the perfect example. If you're writing an actual app, use a DDI library if possible. And there are very good tech talks on those. And the rate API in itself is using OKHTTP client, which is again dependency injected. And what this is doing is it's just getting the rate. I mean, it looks synchronous. Maybe the entire code block is in coroutine scope, or maybe it's an async task executing background. I mean, joking, like don't use async task right now. But what we are doing here is like we have this function which is calling convert to INR. It's taking money in USD as a double. Like, so basically you can think of like some box where you can enter money in USD, and then you call this function and you expect to get, let's say, the total conversion, like let's say $2 for 150 rupees maybe I want to get, and you want to show, let's say, 150 in that text box, right? So if this is the case for unit test, for unit test, I mean, the easiest way out is like you want to test price converter in complete isolation, right? So the best way out is like either use some kind of mock or a fake. I can mock the rate API, and then rate API, every interaction which is going to happen, it's going to return you a fixed thing. So you are not testing the actual integration. Like, like the integration is always going to return you a fixed thing. and you are simply asserting it. But for integration test, what we have to do is like we can create an actual instance, like which is going to be happen. It's going to be the production instance. Instead of like mocking Rate API, now we are mocking the OKHTTP client, which I'm dependency injecting in my Rate API. And finally, when I'm testing it, I am going to call my actual Rate API from price converter, right? So this is what the actual flow or actual production user is going to see, right? So I'm basically testing the integration of real price converter with real Rate API. Nothing is mocked. Cool. So, okay, let's jump directly to the demo part. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Okay, so here, like in unit test, I'm going to talk about 4 things, and mostly like I'm going to talk about unit test on JVM. So if you're using Android, like, and if you're using, let's say, and if you want to unit test any Android component, then you probably need either Roboelectric, like, or you need Android device so that you can run your tests on actual Android device. But in this talk, like I'm going to talk about unit test on JVM only. Like, so basically I'm avoiding unit test on Android, partially because like that's something I've seen everywhere. And that's something that I've seen everywhere, and that's preferred due to stability. Then I'm going to talk about design patterns. I think mostly like, I want to tell you like why following a pattern like MVP, MVVM is like super important. Sure, I think there's a question. I'll come back to it, like how to determine whether an object is mocked or not. Yeah, I think I'm not very sure like what do you want to understand, but yeah, I'll just show you the syntax and maybe you can then. Cool, I think I'll come back to your question, Hitesh. I think once we'll move to the UI test section. So yeah, I want to talk about some standard libraries, Jacoco, like which is for code coverage. You can of course use Coursera or other libraries, but Jacoco is kind of pretty much a favorite library I've seen. I'm going to talk about Roboelectric, Mockito, JUnit, and once I think I've done like some Android testing. I think some Android testing on Android part. I'm going to talk about JUnit like in probably more depth, and then whole fake versus mock discussion, right? Cool. I think we can directly jump to the demo. So let me know like if you guys are able to see the screen like clearly. Like let me know if I have to increase the font size. Cool. So okay, silence says yes. Okay, someone pinged here. Okay. Cool. So what I want to show you is like a very trivial app, like, and there's not much. So I can actually run the app and show you how it looks. Yeah, I think it's running. So so basically this app is following a very simple MVP architecture. And yeah, I think it should load. And what's happening is like, I'm just sending, so I'm just sending the location, the city name, let's say London in this case, I'm submitting it. And then it's returning me the temperature and what is the condition, like, it's cloudy or any of those things, right? So it's a fairly simple app. And the way I've arranged code is like, I have broken it. I'm just using a very simple MVP pattern, like to start off. And like, this is not the perfect MVP pattern. I can think of like multiple variants, but that's not the intention here. Like, I think what I want to show you is like, my main activity is the view layer, and what is it doing is like, it's mostly responsible for like getting your view elements, setting up click listeners, setting up text watchers, like, and like sending the data to presenter. And then your presenter is like your main. So a presenter is the place where you have your entire business logic, like validations on the text you're getting from text input and making the actual network call, and then like creating the getting like from the API model, like you're getting the response back, right? So, and then like, sending back the data to view, right? So basically, if I have to talk about your activity, it's a main view. And your main view has like some methods to set weather, set an error, like getting context, like, which probably I don't need, I think probably I don't need. And like you have a method for set a known error, set loading, like, so some methods to show you progress bar, error, actual response, right? And let me just check. Cool. So dependency injection is super useful in writing tests. Like I'm going to talk about it in a minute. Without dependency injection, the TLDR is you will not be able to swap your component. Like if you have to, let's say, if you're using an actual network client and in your unit test, you don't want to make an actual network call. Without dependency injection, you cannot replace your, let's say, network client with like a fake network client, and which I'm going to show you in my unit test in some time. Yes. Marking Android dependency presence. Yes. So in general, like it's usually like unit test is at a method level. So think of it in this way that you don't want to test your app's functionality. You want to test your code, like unlike UI test, right? So I mean, what I want to test is like I call this fetch weather, and then my API returns me something, and then main view is invoked with, let's say, set weather call, right? So I mean, in this case, like this is like not the perfect example because this function is actually doing more than one thing, like so it's not following the single responsibility principle. But what do you want to do is like you would just want to test your code, like your function, right? So if you have to think of unit tests, I think it makes sense to think of unit tests in terms of methods and not features/stream. I mean, for that you can use UI test, for which we are going to talk later. And for Android dependencies, you don't have to. You can mark it. That's of course possible. But then, I mean, you also have to think, I mean, if you just look at the code, some Android dependencies, the textual is empty is actually static. So if you're using Mockito, you will not be able to mock these things. So Mockito does not work well with static methods or static functions. So for that, either you have to use PowerMock, and like PowerMock is extremely problematic. Like, I mean, I've never seen like proper like a test with PowerMock which work like perfectly or reliably. Like every time we upgraded some libraries, like PowerMock broke. Or the other way around is you can use RoboElectric, which gives you shadow implementations for Android API. So basically for Android APIs, you need Android device, but what RoboElectric does is like, which I'm going to talk later, is like it's going to provide you some JVM based implementations for those dependencies. I'll link all these tests, like, and probably, I mean, we can of course do follow, but I'll definitely link some resources to learn unit tests, like both on JVM and Android. Cool. I think I can jump back. So yeah, I think what I want to tell you is like, so our main activity is, sorry, I think it's throwing some error. Yeah, okay, that's fine. So yeah, our main activity is the view layer. Like, and I've intentionally kept my activity as the view layer. I mean, so I mean, there are two possibilities. I mean, in an MVP pattern, your activity can be a view, and then you have to create a separate presenter, or your activity can be a presenter, and then you can create a separate view. Like, and your view can be just simple custom view. Like, I mean, let's say if I have to talk about the activity underscore main, so your view can be just a subclass which is extending your relative layout. So those are two possibilities. I've intentionally used activity as a view because I want to be in a state like where our presenter is actually not depending on Android component. So hopefully we don't have to use RoboElectric or any other library to test our presenter, and we can use simple good old JVM based tools, JUnit, Mockito, like to test our presenter. That's the ideal world. Are there any other questions? Okay. Cool. So yeah, feel free to ping me. I mean, feel free to interrupt me if something is not clear. So under the hood, what is main presenter doing? It's using RxJava. Like if you're not very familiar, that's also fine. So I mean, I'll link like few tech talks like which talks about RxJava in great depth. So I'm calling this weather API.get weather data, which is retrofit, and the retrofit object, the object is instantiated in the activity, which is not the right thing. Ideally, you should use Dagger or Hilt, and you can create or some other kind of dependency injection or like service locator library. And from there, you can pull your dependencies, and it's going to be far more scalable. Like in this case, your activity is just your view layer, so you should not know your retrofit. But for just to show, like in my main presenter, I am dependency injecting the weather API. And I'm going to talk about that, like why is that important in a minute. And here I'm setting the view like from my main activity. And just because my activity is not going to leak, I'm actually like setting the view to null so that my main view is not retained, like if the activity is killed or something like that, right? And in my fetch weather, I am using RxJava. I'm calling this API weather API.getWeatherData, which is open weather API. And what I'm getting is like I'm starting it with loading. So I want to show a progress bar. And based on the response, like, I mean, if it's loading or if it's like success response, like I'm either showing loader or I'm getting rid of loader and I am showing like the actual weather, I'm setting up an error, right? So it's a fairly simple thing. Yeah, and in destroy, I'm disposing the disposal. So my API calls are cancelled. Like if you're using retrofit or OKHTTP, like if you dispose, retrofit has code written like in a way like this, it will try to cancel your API calls. Cool. And yeah, I think, and I'm using RxJava, like as I'm using I'm like running this call on IO thread. And then once I'm getting the response back, I'm moving it back to the main thread because I want to touch my view from the main thread itself. Cool. So to start off, like, I mean, just a rule of thumb, like, and which I've seen almost everywhere, like don't write test for your activity or your view layer. For your view layer, always write UI test. Ideally, your view layer should not have business logic. It should have only like view related stuff, like find view by ID, set click listeners, and you don't want to test those. Because if you're testing those, then you are testing the Android framework itself, which is not required. So in this case, like we are mostly going to talk about presenter because there's a lot of business logic here. Like, I mean, if have an empty, I'm in my city, which I'm getting from text edit is that empty, then I'm going to set an error. Or like I have a lot of filter and some logic here. Like, so I mean, there's a lot of business logic here. So basically we want to focus on writing test case for only presenters. Yeah. Cool. So let's directly jump to the main presenter test with mocks. So I mean, the first thing which I want to talk about is this is a test like unit test for Android. So I'm using RoboElectric Test Runner, like which is not the ideal world. So that's what I said like I think a few minutes back that we want our test to run in JVM. But I have a RoboElectric dependency here because in my main presenter, I'm using textutils.isEmpty. So if I get rid of this, I can actually get rid of run with RoboElectric.class. Or like I have to use PowerMock to mock my static methods, which is textutil.isEmpty, right? What this test is doing is like it's invoking like a JUnit rule. And I mean, basically JUnit rule is like a set of, you can say a code block, which runs before every test, before method is called. So I mean, the standard lifecycle of a unit test is before, test, and after. So I'm going to talk about lifecycle in more depth, but rule runs before everything. Like I mean, before. Yeah, and then I'm mocking like some dependencies, my main view weather API. And what I'm doing is when I'm creating my main presenter, I'm actually dependency injecting the weather API. So here, if you notice, like I am like changing it with a mock. And the idea of using mock is like in my mock, I can specify that when my weather API is going to ask weather data for London, then return me this some data, right? And what happens is so this was my setup code. And in my actual testing code, I am going to call fetch weather here. And if you notice, this entire code is asynchronous. Like I'm making a network call on IO thread and I'm observing it on main thread. So it's definitely not synchronous. So I'm going to talk about like how can you use libraries which are asynchronous and probably like still your test is going to work fine. So I'm calling fetch weathers and I'm verifying is that main view is called with set loading true. So that means if I started fetching weather, your loader is shown, then your weather is set, and then your set loading is going to be called with false. So your loader is dismissed, right? So let me run this test. And in the meanwhile, if you have any questions, I think running tests always takes time. Feel free to ping me. Yeah, so it worked fine, right? It didn't fail. Like, so that means if I go back to my code and if I look at it, like it's completely asynchronous and this code worked fine. Like, I mean, it's not like that we went to the line number 40, we went to line number 41, and then it completely went out of this function because everything is happening in a background thread, right? So, I mean, the idea is like your test should always run on one single thread if possible. Like, so, I mean, any asynchronous work which you are doing, you should ideally move it to the current thread itself. And that's why we have this JUnit rule. And I'm going to explain like JUnit rule maybe in some more time. But this JUnit rule, what it does is like, it's setting up your IO scheduler like to scheduler.trampoline. So what is it suggesting is like move all your IO work to the main thread, to the blocking thread, not main thread. Sure. I mean, I'm going to talk about, you can always post it in Q&A, which I'm going to look more actively, but I'm going to display you a case where your test is going to fail. Cool. So yeah, I think what I'm doing is like, I am just making like, so basically RX uses IO scheduler, but if you're using any other library, like you can replace those with, so I'm going to show you, let's say you can replace it with some kind of schedulers, which is going to run on the immediate thread, right? And I'm going to call base.evaluate inside my test rule. And this base.evaluate is like the place where your test is run. So basically, this is your pre-setup, and then this is your test, and then I'm resetting the plugins so that like for my next test, I mean, my RX Java plugins are reset or working correctly, right? And to add a rule, like I have just created @rule, which is a JUnit annotation, and it's going to call with public final immediate schedulers rule. So yeah, this is the main test with, I think, main presented test with mocks. And now let's actually get rid of RoboElectric and let's try to run this test. Yeah, as you said, you can use run blocking if you're using coroutines. Yes, so if you notice, this method in textutils is empty, is not mocked. So either you have to use power mock and mock it, or you can use RoboElectric. I'm going to talk about a few things about RoboElectric, how it works internally, but yeah, that's the way. I think another interesting thing which I want to bring here is like I'm using some, so RoboElectric also gives you a like runtime environment.get application. So I mean, and which is your context. And I mean, currently we don't need this in this test, but earlier I was using it. I think another thing which I want to bring out is like, if this weather API is not DI, then I cannot swap it with any other. Okay, I think, yes, I'm going to talk about test rule. Yes, so the test rule is actually making your async call into sync call, right? That's what you got it right. And sure. So yeah, I think let's come back to the test. So I mean, without dependency injection, if let's say I was creating my weather API here itself, which is, let's say somehow I'm just creating my fake weather API or anything like that, like whatever, right? And if I'm not passing it from outside, let's say if I got rid of this, then I cannot change this weather API with, let's say, the fake implementation. So I'm stuck. I mean, if I have to, let's say, change my weather API with fake, then I have to pass it from outside, and that's dependency injection. And for most of the times, you don't have to do constructor dependency injection, because if you have even 3 or 4 layers, it's going to become very, very tedious. Yes. So actually talking about what mocking libs internally do is slightly tricky. But what they do under the hood is you can say that they use reflection to some extent and class loader to actually give you an implementation of, so basically they're going to intercept any network, any call to those libraries. But talking about that in like, I think depth is going to be much, much more tricky. Like, I mean, in case you use Mockito, I mean, I can link a blog post which talks about how Mockito uses ByteBuddy. Like, so it basically does some bytecode manipulation to give you mocked implementation. But yeah, I mean, maybe we can do a follow-up on like how some of these libraries work internally. In this, I'm mostly going to focus on RoboElectric and JUnit. Yes, so testing private method is you cannot access it from outside. The only way I can, I still want to know what's your use case. So the only way I can think of testing a private method is use reflection, make it accessible, invoke the method using reflection, and then do whatever you want to do, assert or anything like that. Does it answer your question? Cool. What's the time, by the way? Okay, I think we have too many things to do. So yeah, I mean, overall, that's the thing which I wanted to point out. Another thing which I want to talk about is like fakes. Yeah, actually, just give me a minute. Actually, I'll also get rid of this immediate schedulers rule. So I mean, someone asked actually, right, what's happening in this rule? So if I get rid of this, then yeah, I think this test is not going to work. Let's just verify it in a minute, and then we can just jump. Yeah, this test failed because our methods were not invoked. Like there were 0 interactions, and the reason was like once you called fetch weather, this entire code from line number 41 is async, so your test case is not blocked on that. So always like, I mean, you can of course use, I mean, countdown latch kind of scenario, but then like your test is going to be much slower. Better thing is you just swap your threads with immediate rule. So I mean, always try to block your threads, and then blocking was another example, right? Which someone pointed out in the coroutine thread. I haven't tried wire mock for mocking. Yeah, if you want to have separation of concern, how will follow that with unit tests where multiple things are done? I think break your function. If you are writing it, you should break your function into smaller functions. That's the only way out. I mean, in case the function is really complex and you are not very confident of, let's say, breaking it up, like, and it contains some important business logic, there are actually books written on top of it, like dealing with legacy code or some of those stuff. So you can, and they talk about some of these things in much more depth. So we can probably do it in follow. But like the easiest way, if you own that function, break it up. Ubottle based on mocked repository function. Yeah, I mean, if you're writing an actual unit test, like probably you may have to mock repo functions. But you can also, like, if your repository is an interface, you can of course always provide fakes, and you can also test the integration between those two components. I mean, there's like no like right and wrong answer, I think, in that particular sense. Cool. So yeah, I think next thing I want to talk about fakes and yeah, I mean, and the problem with mock is like, I mean, the biggest problem, at least with mock, if any of you guys may have noticed, the problem is like mocks test not only what to test, but they also test how to test. So let's say tomorrow, if I go and I'm using this method in my fake main presenter, if I rename this method, then I have to go and, I mean, I have to go and change this in my test as well. Like, I mean, of course, ID refactoring is going to help, but then your test state, not only your, so basically you are actually, there are two problems. One, like your test will become very, very deeply coupled with your actual source code. So I mean, if I'm using mock, then I should know like your weather API.get weather data is actually called inside the actual code. And then you are writing that in your test code, right? So basically you're repeating the same part in your test code, right? So basically you need tightly coupled. Again, like, I mean, I think I'm going to talk about code coverage, and like code coverage is basically like, I mean, ideal world is like how many unit tests for a feature / unit. So ideally we want 100% code coverage. So I'm going to talk about it in some time. Does method stubbing really work? I always get real values when I call the stubbed methods. In unit test, stubbing works fine. What are your thoughts on it? Depends on instrumentation test. If you're not using fakes, ideally it should work, but maybe we can just catch up on this later. Cool. So yeah, I think the problem is like if you're using mocks, then you're leaking your source data in your this. So I need to know that the method you are going to set for loading is called set loading. The method you need to set your weather, like, or you set your weather in view is called, like, so basically everything I need to go check the code, what is the method which I'm calling here, and then I have to write the same method here and verify or do a man on top of it, right? So it's not very ideal. And I think another, so I mean, that's where fakes come in. Like, so I mean, in mocking, the problem is like you are not only testing what to test, you are also testing how to test, right? With fakes, what you do is like for every API you write, I mean, you have to do two things. A, you have to code against interface. So basically, if you look at main presenter, it takes a weather API, which is an interface. In this case, I'm using retrofit, but it's still using an interface. And for every interface, like you create, so basically use program against interface. And if you know solid principle, dependency inversion is also fairly similar. Like basically, higher level modules should not depend on lower level modules. Like in this case, main presenter should not depend on the implementation of weather API, it should depend on interface. Right. And in case of retrofit, if you guys don't know, like retrofit uses Java proxies internally to create the HTTP call. So I mean, again, like that's something we can do it in a separate session. I'll suggest don't do that. Like, I mean, you can create, I mean, you can have like some tests which can do this, like it's going to be an integration. In an ideal world, like if you have like a lot of test cases, like, I mean, in this case, if I have to think, there are so many code paths. There's a code path here. There's a code path actually, like in all these filters, in all, like your filter can return null, you can filter can return not null. So it can have like this alone can have like dozens of tests. If you're going to create an actual network call, you always have to assume what's the reliability of your actual network call. So if your actual network call has a P99 of, let's say, if your actual network call has a 99.9% availability as well, but if you are running 100 tests, like a lot of these are going to fail. Like basically out of 1,000, one test is going to fail. So basically, if you are just going to run, let's say all your tests on CI and you're going to run it only 10 times as well, one of your tests is still going to fail. So I suggest don't hit the actual API call. If you still want to do, you can create few specific tests which are going to test the integration. Cool. So yeah, I think that's something. So coming back, like, so in case you notice, like we were talking, right? Like we were discussing about like use dependency inversion. Like, so in case you guys haven't read solid principles, I'll definitely suggest like learn about solid principles and this dependency inversion and basically D of solid. And what in your when you're going to create tests, now since you're coding against interface, you can actually create a fake. So for every time you are writing an interface as a library developer, like here are my two responsibilities: always program against interface. So basically every class should have interface. And that's a very ideal world. Like in reality, that's not the case always. And whenever you are writing interface, like you provide a fake implementation, which anyone who wants to use your view can use it to test this, right? So yeah, I think coming back, the questions. Okay, I think I'll come back to it later. Sure. So yeah, I think what I want to emphasize here is like I have created a fake class and I'm passing the fake. And in my fake, there's a way, like, so what I'm doing is like whenever I'm emitting, and similarly, I've created a fake view. And in my fake view, what I'm doing is, let's say and I'm passing the fake view to I'm setting the fake view to my main presenter. And whenever, let's say some of these functions are called, right? Let's say main view.set weather. Then my fake view is just going to set a field. And I can assert that that field is set. It's fairly simple in that sense. And in your test, like, so basically another advantage is like if you are a library developer and if you provided fakes, then like, I mean, if you're writing unit tests, then if someone is using mock, they have to go and do like create this when and verify thing in every test case. Like if you're providing fakes, they don't have to create fakes every single time. So that's an advantage. And what I'm doing is like, I'm calling fetch weather. I'm asserting my main view is loading. And then in my fake weather API, I'm emitting some data. So, and this data is like then consumed by my actual code. So this is like, I'm emitting it in some, you can say that I'm emitting it in here. So this is consumed with the actual code. And then I'm asserting, like I'm getting from my fake view, I'm getting the condition, I'm asserting that correct thing is done. I'm going to talk about code coverage in probably maybe 10, 15 more minutes. Yes, so I'll try to talk about these things subject to time. Cool. So I think these are the two interesting things. I think before moving further, I just quickly want to talk about at run with method roboelectric test runner. So for Android, like classes, if you have to mock, like you can use power mock. Like for non-static methods, you can use Mockito, or a better way is use roboelectric. Roboelectric uses something called class loader. So, and what it does is like basically to run, let's say main presenter, you need this API textual.isempty, which is inside the Android code base. So you need an Android device. So what roboelectric does is like sandbox class loader actually load. So basically roboelectric has its own jar, and it's going to replace your, let's say, platform Android text view with as JVM based text view. And all these classes, like if you have a text view field class in Android, the equivalent class for that is going to be shadow text view. Like for anything in Android, if you want to find a edit text, you can find shadow edit text. Sorry, I think I'm not sure why I'm not able to. Yeah, but you can see, I mean, shadow absolute list view, shadow apps seek bar, like, and this actually implement apps pin bar, which is an Android widget library, right? So, I mean, just a very simple thing I think I wanted to bring out, like, I mean, and under the hood, like it's still using, your test. So your test is using roboelectric test runner, which extends sandbox test runner, which extends block JUnit 4 class runner. So under the hood, still JUnit 4. Testing mostly on Android is JUnit 4. And your sandbox test runner is actually, I think it's setting the class loader. Yeah, so it's basically setting your context class loader here. So what's happening is you have, so basically the way Java works is like it has a class called class loader. And when you, let's say, when you want to, let's say, invoke a method, then class loader loads that class and it invokes a method. In case of roboelectric, what it's pretty smart actually, and it's fairly easy to actually do a very simple quick hack, which you guys can also do like in your free time, is like build your own roboelectric like library. All you have to do is you have to create a custom class loader. And when you are going to call your load class method, so basically your sandbox class loader is a URL class loader. So URL class loader loads file from a jar, like, so you can think of it as, so basically all the Java programs you usually ship, it is a jar and these jars have set of files. And URL class loader is like you give fully qualified class name and it can fetch, like it can get data like from load class. So I mean the TLDR here is like you can read how sandbox class loader works, and you can actually, all you have to do is in your test code, you have to just swap your current test loader, class loader with sandbox class loader and roboelectric, and that way you can actually create your own implementation of roboelectric. Cool. I think so. That is it. So, okay, how much time do we have? So it's 5:52 already, right? Cool. So I think that is all on testing on Android with JUnit. Now, actually, I want to switch gear and I want to talk about more about. I want to talk more about JUnit. So yeah, I think just before moving further, I want to bring out like this one very interesting resource, which was written by like whole teammate of mine. And why he talks about like why mocking is not great and why fakes are better. So some things I talked about, but this is like super exhaustive. So feel free to go through this. And yeah, I think now I want to switch gear and like I want to talk about the underlying libraries, basically that is JUnit, because that's the one where we use most. And Mockito maybe we can do someday later. We already talked about roboelectric, and then we are going to talk about code coverage. So actually, before moving further, maybe we can just quickly talk about code coverage and then come back to JUnit. And hopefully, I think someone asked, right, like how many unit tests for a feature, or yeah, I mean, code coverage should be. So, I mean, code coverage, you can have multiple libraries. One is, I'll try to cover, like maybe we may not get time for UI test, but let's see. For code coverage, there are multiple libraries. Covertura is one. Another one is with Jacoco, and which is like something I've seen almost everywhere. Like so, like the setup is fairly trivial. I think like you can just copy paste it from internet. Like so, basically this is your Jacoco title. It creates a custom task for Jacoco, and the reason it lives in the topmost repository is because if you have a multi-module code, you can actually apply this. And to apply this, all you have to do is apply from project directory /jacoco.gradle. And what it's going to do is it's going to create custom task, create debug Android test coverage report, which you can run, or which we can do, and it's going to run all your unit tests. And yeah, I think it's just going to take 1 minute, and hopefully we can just show the code coverage part. So, and once you run this, your code coverage reports are generated in Jacoco folder. Yeah. And for this, you can actually open it in Chrome. And you can see that this is like, these are the number of test cases I have written. So this is my main activity, which is my view layer. And I said, I'm not going to write tests here. I mean, of course, I can have UI test here. Like, so, I mean, coverage is not going to be so low. But here, like what I want to show you is like, Jacoco gives you like how many instructions are not tested. As an example, if I look at this, like everything that's green is tested, like unit tested. So I've created a unit test. I mean, constructor, of course, setting main view, of course, I'm doing it in my main presenter test with fix. I'm setting the view. So of course that's tested. But what I have not tested is an empty city case, like another main view is setting the empty error or not, right? That's something I have not tested. And there are some, but I think one just minor caveat, like there are two things. One is missed instructions, one is missed branches. So basically, ideally what you want is you want all of this to be green, all these numbers to be 100% in an ideal world, but sometimes that does not happen. So let's say you want to keep a threshold of 95%, maybe 90%. Sometimes you just have simple poses and you cannot, like, you don't want to unit test those, right? Like you don't want to test like whether you're setting something and that's working fine. So what I want to bring out is like, there are two things. One is red, and this is like the path where your unit test never ran. Like, so in my path, if you look at my unit test, I'm never like calling it with an empty city, right? So if I just do that, like this part of code path is going to hit. But then there's also a yellow thing, like which is here, like which tells about that, okay, this code path is executed, but there are multiple branches out of it. Like you can have a branch which goes inside this, or you can have a branch which goes here. Like, so everything yellow, right? I mean, here I'm filtering whether model.get weather is not equal to null, right? If I'm filtering it, then I'm going to get null. And if I'm getting a null, then I'm going to set an error, like some error happened, right? But I am like, when I'm creating my weather model, I'm never creating it with null. So this code path is not like this branch is not executed. So if you notice, like I've missed a lot of branches and a lot of code paths. So overall my coverage is 86%, but in terms of branches, it's just 50%, right? I mean, here 2 branches are possible. Here 2 branches, again, 2 more branches, right? So I mean, I've missed a lot of branches which are possible, right? So ideally, like if you want to know like how many tests to write, use a code coverage tool, like use Jacoco. That's the most famous one. But if your company is using Covertura, like, or if you want to use Covertura, you can use that. And yeah, that will give you a much better idea on this. Yeah, I think cool. So let's jump directly to JUnit. Okay. Someone actually, I think, pinged here. How do you know what is your code coverage using tools to verify that? Yes, I'm using Jacoco to verify this. I already showed Jacoco's setup here, like, which is something I've copy pasted, and for all your app modules, you have to do this. Trace a custom Gradle task. If you run this, you get, like, you can set like where you want to output in Jacoco. like basically in apps build reports coverage tests, you get this index HTML, which is your code coverage report. And here you can see all your code that's not covered. Is that the question? Sure, I'll link, currently I don't have much slides, but I'll definitely link more things. Or if there are none, then probably I'll just try to create a simple video, like talking about basics of Roboelectric. Sounds good. So let's shift gear and let's jump to JUnit 4. And this is like very interesting because I've seen developers with a lot of years of experience and they still don't know how JUnit works internally. As a result, they are not able to harness JUnit to its full power. So I'm going to talk about basics, lifecycle, runners, rules, more details here. So I think I have UI test after that, but maybe it's going to take more time. So we'll see if we'll be able to cover that. Yes, I think it is okay to run against a development server, but then you should all your reliability. Take a look at that. If your development server is always going to be up, and you really don't want it, if you're using even if you're using an app which is non-trivial, and that's why probably you're writing UI tests. And if your app is making 15 network calls, and if your availability is anything less than 9.9, your tests are going to fail very, very frequently, and that's the reason. What I'll suggest is for automated UI test, for most of the tests, prefer to use some kind of mock, actually, if you're using OKHTTP, there are libraries where you can have record replay mode. So we can talk about this, once I'm going to talk about the UI test component, but yeah, it's usually a good idea to you want to test your app behavior, right? And that's your one kind of test. And the other test is you want to test your apps integration with backend. What I'll say is in the category number 2, minimize your number of tests for reliability. I hope that answers your question. At Uber, 99% of tests were in the first category. And I know Airbnb also does the same because the library which I've referenced, OKReplay, I think they also do replay record kind of thing. So yeah. Yeah, I hope this answers your questions, but it gives you a very simple way, where you can record your test cases. Where you can record your response, you can put it in assets, and you can next time you can run it in replay mode. So your network call you are not going to hit the actual network call. And under the hood, it's very simple. It's just interceptors. I have used JUnit 5. I find it very, very complex, even for JVM project. JUnit 4 was very simple. There are very interesting blog posts on why JUnit 5 is not very popular. It's an Android, you don't have JUnit 5 anywhere. Everything is built on top of JUnit 4. And I'll definitely link some interesting discussions on JUnit 4 versus JUnit 5. I hope I just remembers it. But yeah, I find it very, very complex, to use with. Cool. I think I'll directly jump to JUnit 4 and how it works internally. I know the question's right. So I think the first aspect I want to talk about is lifecycle. And what I want to point out is JUnit has multiple methods: before class, @test, before, after, and after class. So basically, before class is a static method. And I think without showing, without discussing, maybe we can just print the methods that are printed, right? And I've also added a constructor. One, I think, concrete thing which I want to point out is in JUnit, your different unit tests, if you write 2 unit tests @test, and then another test with @test2, they both run on different instances, of object. So basically, JUnit is going to create 2 instances of lifecycle test. And first time it's going to call lifecycle test.test1, and to the other instance is going to call new lifecycle. So basically, if I have to talk under the hood, it's not as simple as that, but it's doing something like this. And yeah, I think it's doing something like this to under the hood. And the reason for this is if you are writing unit tests, ideally you want your test to run in isolation. So basically what happens, if your unit test 1 set a field or variable or like a property, let's say string ABC, and forgot to unset it, right? Then your test 2 may accidentally access that property if it's using the same instance, right? So let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of this as well. I mean, what I want to point out is like if I'm running these two tests, I hope this is visible. So @ before class is actually run before anything, even before constructor. It's a static method, which makes sense. And even if you have 10 tests, @ before class is only going to run once for all the tests. And @ after class, if you notice, is going to run only once, even if you have 10 different tests, right? In this case, we have 2 tests. So a constructor is invoked, your before method is invoked, your test method is for test 1 is invoked, which is this one, test 1. And your @after is invoked. And then your constructor is again invoked. So what I want to point out is like if you're writing 2 unit tests in JUnit, like by default, JUnit is always going to create a different instance for each test so that your test can run in isolation. Okay, and if you want to like do anything common to all your tests, then use @ before class, @ after class. Yeah. Cool. I think so that's done. I think I have a very similar demo here, like with, I have one more demo, like which is where I just ran this test twice, but I think you can just go through it and cool. I think another interesting thing which I want to talk about is JUnit test runner, right? So when I'm writing lifecycle test, like something magical is happening, right? I mean, how does it know like this class is a test class, right? I mean, any class with that, even a single @ test method is a test class, right? How does JUnit know and which test runner it uses? So the how part, I'll leave it to you guys, like figure out how JUnit knows it. The test runner part is something I'm going to talk about. So we talked about RoboElectric test runner, which extends Sandbox test runner, which extends BlockJUnit for class runner. And yeah, I think it goes up to runner, like which is the base class in JUnit, right? So what I want to point out, and like probably you guys can again like look at it, like BlockJUnit for class runner is the runner, which is like picked by default, like by JUnit. Unless you're writing a parameterized test, then in that case, we also have custom test runners. Like, so if you want to use parameterized test case, say there's a parameterized runner as well. So yeah, I mean, so BlockJUnit for class runner. And I think what I wanted to show you is, let's say I'm running this test. What I wanted to just show you is that it indeed is the case, like BlockJUnit for class runner is hit. And you can see that BlockJUnit for class runner is hit, right? So this is the test runner, right? I mean, the implications of, or the reason why it's so important or interesting to know is you can extend it, this class runner, you can create your custom runner and you can add some custom functionalities you want. Like, so at Uber, we had a custom runner for all our test cases and which had like a lot of interesting functionalities, like better error messages and other things, which I'm going to show you now. So yeah, I think I want to show you custom runner. So I did the same thing, like I just extended my BlockJUnit for class runner. And what I've done is like by default BlockJUnit for class runner, like if you create a method, like, and if you annotate a method with @ignore, JUnit ignores those tests because that's what written in the BlockJUnit runner, right? Sorry. If you notice, I'm getting the annotation and that's what written in my BlockJUnit for runner. Like if I have ignore annotation, then ignore it, right? I don't want to do that. Like I want to run my test even if it has @ignore annotation, right? That's a very simple thing. How to get started with testing, how to develop apps with unit. And I think just follow like good coding practices, solid principles, dependency injection. From starting itself, use Stagger, like, or HILT if you want to keep it slightly simple. For everything, program against interface. Retrofit, that's a good thing. Like it's by default, if you notice, whether API is an interface. But even if you're creating room DB and it's not an interface, abstract it behind an interface, provide a fake. Like, and for a lot of these libraries like Retrofit, you also, like these library owners also have an idea on how to test their libraries if you're using it. So if you're using Retrofit, they also have OKHTTP mock server. So like basically Retrofit depends on OKHTTP and OKHTTP you can use mock server. So I mean, if you're developing an app from scratch, that will be my suggestion. If you're using an existing app, and that's going to be a different beast, and we can talk about it later. I hope it answers your question. Yes, so this is very interesting. I think, like, and I hope this is going to be super useful, like for all of you who like owns the test infrastructure. There are not many actually. Like you can definitely follow any project from Square, like Retrofit, OKHTTP client. You can look at their source code and their test cases, and those are like top notch. But I mean, in the Android world, I mean, I still have to see. I mean, I want to create a like fairly non-trivial application, like which is not just Hello World and like that does a lot of things and then unit testing with it, like building unit testing from scratch. So hopefully, like, I mean, maybe in a few weeks, I'll be able to provide you guys with something there. Yes, so what I've done is I've written a custom runner, which extends your BlockJUnit 4 class runner. And if I have to run this custom runner, I can just throw in at run with custom runner.class, right? And what this custom runner does is like is ignored method I've overridden. I've said like always, like don't never ignore. Like, so it's always good to return you false. And I've added like I've overridden the test method, which is again like, and ideally we should use override, but I've overridden the test name method, and I have annotated and I've verified and I've created a custom annotation description. So this is a custom annotation. This annotation is available at runtime. Just want to bring out a small caveat. So I believe you guys may have used Dagger, like that also uses annotations, but those are at compile time. Here it is at runtime because I want to use reflection. And I'm verifying that if it has annotation, then take this annotation, and this annotation has this field value where you can add more descriptive message. Okay. And what I've done is like, I'm going to run this. So it has only one test one. And I have added @ignore. But my hope, I mean, the hope here is like, it's going to run that test. And it actually ran that test @before, after, right? Now, what I want to bring, so I think, I mean, I'll just comment it out and I'll comment BlockJUnit 4 class runner, right? So BlockJUnit 4 class runner by default ignores any test with the @ignore annotation, and it did. So that means our custom runner is working fine, right? I think another thing which I want, so here's one more aspect which I've added in custom runner, which is I've overridden the test name method, right? So what happens if my test fails, right? Like, I mean, I want more descriptive method. Let's say I want to say this test is testing something like fairly not useful message, like fairly useless message, but still, like if I run it, it's going to pass because it's not failing anywhere. Sorry, the rate and with my mistake. Just give me a minute. Yeah, so it passed, and before, after, but now let's fail the test. So I'm throwing an error, which is a runtime exception. So it's not a checked exception. I don't have to catch it. And with custom runner, I'm going to get very interesting thing here. So my test failed, and the good thing is it's telling me here, like test one, this test is something is actually failed. So I like in JUnit, you can write method names, but those are not very descriptive, right? And like in your error messages, you can actually create an annotation, description, annotation, and you can add more details here. Cool. So yeah, I think that's all about runner. Like, let me know if you guys have any more questions. I think there are just two more aspects I want to talk about JUnit. One is rules. And rules are like insanely useful because I already showed you one rule in my presenter test with fakes, which was this immediate schedulers rule. And the idea is rules are always going to work before your before, right? Before this. So you get a chance to, so you get a composable unit, which you can just stick here and it's going to run. So you don't have to, let's say, write same code again and again and before, right? You don't have to write. You can, like anything you have to write, let's say here, you can move in rule. Cool. So what I want to, I think, emphasize here is like, I want to talk about like custom rules and, okay. So I mean, I just want to show you a very simple test, like which does just one simple thing. Like I have initiated a static counter. Sorry, the questions. Way to present unit test reports in a CI server pipeline in a better way. That's a big question. I mean, usually like you have ways to configure your Chacoco code coverage, and in Jenkins you can of course fetch like those details. Like so, I mean, but maybe we can pick it in a. We can also use backticks to be elicited for names. Yes, in Kotlin. This is Java, but yeah, I mean you can do that. Correct. I mean, the idea there was like I just wanted to show you can write a custom runner and like not like the particular feature I say, but yeah, I mean that's not the perfect use case. So I mean, what I want to show you is a simple case like where you have a static counter, and if your count is less than 2, then you're going to increment the count and throw an exception. And if your count becomes 2, then you're not going to throw exception, and so your basically your test is going to fail 2 times. But if you're going to retry it in the third time, it's going to work, right? A very simple thing is like, let's say if you're using actual network calls, your server may be down or like you're experiencing 5xx. So you may want to add retries. And if it works, it's fine. Like, I mean, then your test worked, right? So for this, what I've done is I've created a very simple retry rule. And again, like I've created a very simple annotation at the rate retry. Which has 2 things. I'm mostly going to talk about times, which tells you like how many times to retry test if your test fails, like with an exception, of course. And I've added a rule at the rate rule public final. So that's how you write a rule. And any rule you write, it implements test rule. Like even the other rule I showed you implements test rule. There are other sub base classes as well. It has this method, and what I am doing is I'm just finding the retry annotations here, and I'm calling base.evaluate. Like, and I've created a while loop here. And what I'm doing is I'm calling base.evaluate. So base.evaluate, what it does is like it calls your test case. So basically it calls before, test, after. So basically whatever, and if it fails, then I'm catching an exception. I'm incrementing the count. And the next time I'm again going to retry like until my while is less than this, right? If it's not, then I'm returning from this place itself. So that's the example I wanted to show you. And I think what I want to show you is like, if I ran it 3 times, yeah, the test pass because I've added a retry rule, right? Like if I get rid of this, the test failed. So even though I've added it, I haven't added the annotation in the method through an error, right? So this is one way you can write. I mean, I'll recommend like to have a common retry policy for all your tests. So you should not depend on retry annotation. But if you want to do that, you can feel free to do that. I mean, just one minor caveat I think I wanted to show you is yeah, I mean, by default, your before base evaluate method is called, which is in your rule. I mean, I think I've just copy pasted here. So I mean, by default, your before base evaluate method is called, which is inside your rule. And then your test is invoked. It failed. So your after base evaluate is not called because it throws an exception. So it's went here. And then your test is invoked again, failed again, test invoked. And yeah, after in the third attempt, because count became 2, so no exceptions thrown, and after base evaluate is thrown, right? So this is rule again, like you can go through this. Yeah, your rules, I'll suggest like go through JUnit Wiki. It's pretty good. Like it talks about existing rule, like temporary folder, like if you have to create files which are deleted after your test is, let's say tear down, like or after your after. You can use temporary rule folder, expected exceptions. I'll suggest go through this. And yeah, I think in general, JUnit Wiki is pretty good. Like go through these, it talks about assertions, assumes. Some APIs are not great, like crappy, like assume is not great, like so don't use those. But for most of the other things, like it's great. And it also talk about multi-thread code and concurrency. So it's a really good starting point if you want to learn about JUnit, and you can do it on JVM. Yeah, so I think I mean, maybe we can do takeaways, and shall we like open like last 10 minutes, and we can skip UI test because that's a lot of things. Cool, yeah, takeaway. Invest in design patterns, segregate out Android 900 component, MVP, MVVM, MVI, whatever it is your thing. Code against interface, follow solid principles, provide fake for implementation, prefer fake over mocks, create an abstraction over third-party libraries like you're using. If you're using library from Google, like Google a lot of times break their APIs. Secondly, they also give a lot of static APIs, like everything in permission, all those things static. And statics are like really, really hard to mock, like or really hard. So, I mean, and some of these libraries like Google Play services, they don't have equivalent roboelectric test classes. So maybe create your own wrapper and under the hood call those static methods. Yeah, UI test, I think I'm not going to talk about most things, but the only thing, interesting thing I wanted to point out, like given that it has been asked a few times, is this just these two things, I think replay, record, and robot. So, I mean, I just wanted to, like I've mentioned the case, like if you're hitting the actual network call, your test failure is going to be very high, as well as your test speed. So the easiest way out is you can use, like you can create your own interceptor, like record interceptor, replay interceptor. In record interceptor, you get the response, you store it in a file. Replay interceptor, if you are running it in replay mode, you can read it from file, and you can set an annotation with @replay. So when you are running locally for the first time, when you're writing the test, you call it with @replay record equal to true. You get the things, like you pull the zero, so you get the response stored in your SD card. You can pull from there, you can store it in your assets directory, and the next time your replay interceptor is going to replay the response. It's not going to hit the actual network call. I mean, the only thing which I want to point out is like we did all this in Uber, and there's an existing open source library which you can use out of the box if you're using OKHTTP, is OK Replay. So yeah, I mean, feel free to like ping me like if you have any questions later. And the fun final thing which I want to point out is this very interesting pattern called robot. And if you're coming from Selenium world, you already know this because it's super popular there. Like it's called page object pattern. And if you're writing UI tests, I'll definitely suggest, if you have to just pick one thing, pick robot pattern. I mean, the example I want to show you, if you have 3 different, let's say, test cases, like here you have to add recipient, like, and you have to send. And like basically this app does is like you need to provide it a valid email address. And if it's not valid, so if it's a valid email address, you print send and success is print. If it's not, so let's say if you click foo@par.com, and if you entered it here and press send, it's going to return you success. But if you enter, let's say foo or empty, it's going to return you failure. So basically the test, the way Espresso, so I'm using Espresso, but I mean, and I'll recommend you to use Espresso and don't go and check Appium. So you have to do on view with hint, let's say recipient. This is how you find your view. Then you perform some action, type text, and then on view with text send. Like, so I found the button, I performed the action, click, and then on view with text success, and I checked it's visible, right? And of course, if it's synchronous, then you have to make sure that you have some kind of feeds provided there, right? I mean, the only thing which I want to point out is like, if you notice, if I change this recipient tomorrow to recipient text, then if you have written 3 tests, all the 3 tests are going to break. So what I want to tell you, the problem here is like, again, like you are mixing what to test with how to test. Ideally, we should have some method which tells a type text in, let's say, this box, receive foo@bar.com, right? I should not find all this in all my tests. So the best way is you can create robots, and these robots can like abstract out that logic. So this robot can abstract out, let's say, the on view with find ID, let's say recipient method. So you have abstracted it out. Now, if in a separate method, if you have to invoke it, you are just going to call payment.recipient, and you are just going to pass foo@par.com, right? So, and what happens is like, let's say if this method breaks, let's say tomorrow if recipient is changed to recipient X, then you have to just change it in your robot once. And another advantage is you get a very fluent API. So you get like payment.recipient.send, and you can even add like .success there. Yeah, there's a tech talk like by Jake Wharton, testing robots. Do that, go through this. There's a blog post by Martin Fowler. So this is a far more common pattern. I've used a lot of Selenium before, so I know page object pattern, but even Selenium Wiki has one. So feel free to go through those. Cool. I think we are almost there. So I have mostly used counting idling resource, but my understanding is counting idling resource extends idling resource. Yeah. I mean, so basically counting idling resource is just like, it just gives you a simpler way of implementing idling. It is an implementation of idling resource. So let's say, I mean, in your actual library or app, you want to block until your API call or some expensive process which is happening on background thread. So before running the task, you can, in counting idling resource, you can just increment, and after the long task, you can just decrement, and you can just register it in your Espresso idling resource. And the good thing is, like, after that, so whenever your counting idling resource becomes 0, your test is not going to be blocked. So basically, until your test is like, your idling resource has not become 0, your test is going to be blocked. And like, I'll definitely suggest like use the idling resources provided by a library, like Jake Wharton has written one. I mean, I'll suggest don't do that. Don't write your own idling resources for most of the things.
Well, that brings us to the end of this wonderful session. I would like to thank each one of you for joining and hope you learned something new from today's session. We will look forward to your posts and comments on our LinkedIn post. And do not forget to tag Recro and Harshit in your posts. Right. And also thank you so much, Harshit, for joining us. And it was awesome having you. Thanks for taking out time and sharing your insightful thoughts.
Yeah, I think where can they find shared resources? Like, I mean, these slides and others, like I'm still going to add more resources based on the, I think, input. Okay. But like, in case they want to find these slides, what's the best?
Okay, so I guess we anyways upload that on YouTube. So I will add your slides in the description. So everyone can have the access to that.
Yeah.
So once we are out with the editing and everything, so we will upload that on a YouTube channel. So you guys can just go there, have a relook if you are missed on any point, or if you want to share that with your friends. So that would be great. And before we end the session here, there are a few things that I would like to share. We have created a community of developers called Recro Tech Circle, wherein you can connect with fellow developers, get career opportunities, ask for help. The link to join the community is in the chat box. So feel free to join there and get connected with like-minded people and ask your queries and discuss the trends and challenges out there. So we have made a post about the session, so do comment on your learnings on the post. The link of the post is also in the chat, so feel free to do that. If you have more questions, connect with Harshit on LinkedIn and subscribe, and you can subscribe to our YouTube channel so that we share the same content of this webinar and then share the slides with you that he has presented. Obviously, we had time constraint, and UI testing was such a vast topic that we could not able to have this on our webinar today. So we would love to have Harshit on our upcoming webinars. So feel free to just join our community and let us know if you want another session on UI testing, and we would love to have Harshit on board for discussing the Android testing or UI testing in advanced level. And if you're open, if you're exploring for career opportunities, Recro is hiring passionate developers. Check out the current positions at Recro. You might find something for yourself, or refer a friend who would take the advantage of this opportunity, and you can find something for yourself, and we could actually get you placed in the high top A-grade startups of the country. Okay, to stay updated with such events, follow us on social media. And that's all for this session, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope to see you in the next one. And stay home, stay safe. Thank you so much.